One-on-One with Kevin Stanfield.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of One-on-One. I'm Kevin Stanfield. Today on the show we're going to be talking about infrastructure, talking about transportation, and we're going straight to the top with this discussion today because my guest is U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Mr. Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Let's get right to it, and we're going to talk about how your job applies to everybody living here in Colorado. You've made a couple of trips here to Colorado for a specific project. Tell me a little bit about this project on I-70.
That's right. We're really excited about the work that is now underway on I-70. I had a chance to see it for myself a few weeks ago. We have put $100 million in to help get this done, improving the current phase, improving about 8 miles along that mountain corridor. This is something that's important not just to residents of the region, but really people across the country, whether they realize it or not, because that stretch of I-70 that goes through Colorado is a critically important part of America's supply chains. It's also a vulnerable part of America's supply chain, especially as we're seeing more wildfires, more floods, more mudslides. And, it was a period some time ago when I-70 was out of commission because of that, some of those extreme experiences. So we're working to make sure that we have stronger, more resilient infrastructure. That's what this project is all about.
So you were recently in the state overseeing the project as it's being carried out, right? Meeting the workers and everything like that.
That's right. One of the best parts of this is the workers who get the good paying jobs along the way. Of course, the goal is the finished project. But even before you get to that, we know that we're investing in the regional economy by creating what are so often these very good paying skilled jobs. And what I love about the multi-year approach of President Biden's infrastructure package is we're not just funding 1 year or one project. We're really building out an infrastructure decade. And that's true whether it's projects like this, some of the transit investments we're making, the airports we're improving from some of the biggest to some of the smallest airports in America, really trying to get at every form of transportation with a long-term plan and then put real money behind that plan to get things built like that set of improvements along I-70.
Well, I want to reiterate what you just pointed out here. This I-70 project that goes through Glenwood Springs is actually critical for not only whether you live on the western slope or the Front Range. It's critical for everybody as well as everybody in the country because of all the traffic that runs through that area. I want to point out again something else you said, that this was all possible because of President Biden's infrastructure law. Now, indulge me for a moment here, if you will. This was a bipartisan law that was passed by members of Congress. Is that true?
That's right. Yeah, we went to Congress with this plan in 2021. It was a top priority of President Biden, and we had a number of Republicans in both the House and the Senate cross the aisle, work with Democrats, work with me, work with President Biden to get it done. So very much a bipartisan. Doesn't mean we got everybody, but it was a bipartisan effort. I think because, funding roads and bridges like this, funding things like I-70 or the Glenwood Springs project, getting that new bridge built, which we're proud of too, or any of the other things we're doing, really shouldn't be partisan. I mean, you don't have to be a Republican or a Democrat to care about having a bridge or road be in better shape. And I think that's why we had so many Republicans and Democrats working together on this.
I want to push this issue just one more step, if you'll indulge me once again. Bipartisan these days. It's my opinion and my observation that, bipartisan is the way we do things here in American government, and that's the ideal. But even by that word bipartisanship is fluid these days, especially during an election year.
Yeah, you could say that. I think right now there's a lot of partisan pressure, and there are really some weird things that happen in terms of how people talk about what should be celebrated as a national achievement. I've been having a disagreement with Representative Boebert over the last day or two over her seeking to take credit for that Glenwood Springs project after voting no on the funding that made it all possible. But again, I want to emphasize, even though she was not one of them, there are a lot of Republicans who lined up with Democrats, people who don't vote together on most things, don't agree on most things, but we can all come together. Well, not all, most of us can come together and agree that it's a good idea to put those investments into our infrastructure. I would even add, I think this is part of the fight against inflation. A big part of what pushed prices up in the immediate aftermath of COVID was the pressure on our supply chains. And again, an investment in I-70, whether you live in that region or not, is an investment in our supply chains. We also heard a lot when I was on the ground talking to people in communities like Glenwood Springs, Grand Junction, Rifle, about the pressure on the cost of housing. Which can be alleviated somewhat if you have good transit options, at least. I mean, you have more options in terms of where you can live and still get to work, especially if you're working in that tourism economy, which is a great economic engine. But we see the cost of housing and just think a lot of people are excluded from even having a shot at those good paying jobs. So to me, this is just roll up your sleeves, get it done kind of work. Obviously, I'm proud that President Biden was the one who signed that bill and proposed this big infrastructure push. But I'm equally proud that in the House and the Senate, a lot of Republicans were ready to roll up their sleeves to work with us, work with Democrats. We didn't agree on every single piece or every single particular, but we agreed that this was a good idea.
All right, we've got just a couple of minutes left, and I know your time is precious, so I want to bring this a little closer to our home here along the western slope and talk about that bridge on Highway 50 going down to Gunnison, the middle bridge at Blue Mesa Reservoir. The latest we've heard on this from CDOT is that thing's going to have to be totally revamped, and it brings up the issue of this bridge is more than 60 years old. And it seems we've got this attitude, or we had this attitude of build them and forget them, but they require maintenance. And I think we tend to forget about that.
Yeah, that's right. We can't have what in the military we used to call fire and forget. We can't have that be the approach to infrastructure. You got to make sure you have a life cycle approach. That means investing in getting it right and investing in maintaining, fixing, and repairing. And as you mentioned, this is an asset that really needs to be fully replaced. That's part of why it's expensive, but we think it's worth the $49.6 million that I signed off on as part of that rural infrastructure programs created through the bipartisan infrastructure law to get this done. The other thing is needs change over time. So 60 years ago, we didn't see the severity of wildfires that we're seeing today. It's one of the reasons why the project scope now includes a second paved evacuation route connecting residents of that south corridor with State Highway 82, because we've seen how much more important that is than people might have thought about when they were putting up that bridge in the first place 60 years ago. So, we're really trying to build not just for this year's needs or yesterday's needs, but for what we think might be needed 50 years from now. And part of what I'm proudest of in the infrastructure moment that we're in is the idea that when my kids or even their kids someday are traveling or going about their lives, they'll be counting on the infrastructure that we're building together right now.
All right, U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, thank you so much for your time, sir.
Same here. Thanks for having me on.
All right.